but they worry about their own health or what may happen, or am I going to make a sale next week, or am I going to make a sale next month? Am I going to make a sale ever again? Why are you worrying about those things when you should be worrying about the things you can control? That's all you should be worried about, are the things you can control. And rather than be worried about them, why don't you just do something about it?
All right. Welcome to episode 9 of Brisbane Base. Today my guest for the second time is Drew Davies. Drew is the selling principal and director of Place Ascot, a residential real estate sales firm employing 17 staff and turning over in excess of $100 million worth of inner city property each and every year. Drew commenced his career in real estate sales in August of 2013 with nothing to his name besides a hefty chunk of credit card debt and a strong Kiwi accent. And just over 6 years later has established himself as one of the top agents in Ascot and Hamilton, breaking sales records and generating millions of dollars in gross commission along the way. Drew's high profile has attracted partnerships with celebrity clients and coverage from such prestigious publications as the Courier Mail and news.com.au, in addition to various other industry heralded outlets. And if all that wasn't enough, Drew has somehow found the time to amass over 32,000 followers on Instagram, making him Australia's most followed agent on the platform. Brother, welcome back to the show.
And I've lost my Kiwi accent. It's good to be back, man.
Man, I'm absolutely pumped.
I had this thought this morning, and I just want you to put me out of my misery, because when you invited me back, I thought, this is it. He's coming back. He's gonna surprise us all and say he's coming back to real estate.
Man, unfortunately, it's not happening for today, but you never know, right?
We'll see.
But I'm pumped to be sitting down again, because I think what we're about to get into today, mindset and mental toughness, it's extremely important always, particularly in your line of work, but particularly relevant right now, because the reality is, and we were talking about it before, we're really in uncharted waters, right? Like the times we're in are defined by uncertainty and risk and stress and worry. And I almost find it interesting because that's like the environment you've been operating in for most of your life, and certainly the entirety of your real estate career, right? Like you've had many brushes with nearly going flat broke, and you've been in tens of thousands of dollars of debt, and you've faced your fair share of adversity. And so I think in many ways the mindset that's helped you to where you are now are going to help everyone else with the times we're facing at the moment. So to start us off, I just wanted to, gauge your opinion on what do you think it is about you that allows you to rise to the occasion in so many of these high stress, high pressure situations you find yourself in? So like most other people would crumble, but you seem to perform every time. Like for someone else who's wanting to cultivate that headstrong mindset, how can they go about it?
I've always been very conscious of the fact that there's only so much that you can affect in the world. So a lot of how you go about your business and much of your success is based on how you react to things. 90% I believe of it is how you react to a lot of what's going on. And this is certainly, a massive change in how we're operating, I think, and it's affected everybody. But it's certainly, we've been through these times throughout modern history in the past. It's just, this has happened a lot. It's been very sudden and it's been very drastic. So everyone's really scrambled to see how they can change their business to suit. But in short, I think I'm just very good at dealing with what's in front of me at the time. I don't spend a lot of time worrying about things I can't affect.
Take us back, because I'd be curious to know this. The moment you found out when the government announced it was upgrading its restrictions on, no more open homes, no more auctions, really, not that you were an auction agent, but it really, open homes particularly, essentially changed the way you went about your business since you've been selling homes. Like when you heard that, what was your internal dialogue at that point in time? What was going through your mind at that point? Because I think that really highlight the type of person you are.
Yeah, I had a few different dialogues go through. The main one was, thank God I'd spent so much time working on buyers, because I think that's what's going to make the difference in agents right now, is those who can handle a buyer with care throughout the process. Because agents who are just putting an ad up and waiting for buyers to come to them, I think they're obviously going to really struggle.
And that applies to all other business domains. It's about being on the front foot with the people who are going to earn you your commission check or your paycheck, right?
Absolutely. I was speaking to an agent from another agency the other day who actually saw me filming something recently and said, well, you're not bringing that to market, are you? And I just thought, of course I'm bringing it to market. I think if you're a committed seller, whether you have to sell or want to sell, everyone's at home. There's no more eyeballs on screens than right now. So I think it's the perfect time if you're committed to a sale. I think now is when you should be getting your property on the market. You may not have, well, not may not, you definitely won't have as many people through the home. We're doing a lot more virtual inspections, but an inquiry in this environment is certainly someone who wants to purchase.
In terms of being a business operator, I want to talk about becoming anti-fragile, because most people know what the word fragile means, right? Like it's easily broken or frail, but being anti-fragile is a little counterintuitive. So it doesn't just mean really strong, which is what you probably would think it means. It actually means that you grow stronger as more stress is applied. And so the health crisis aside, because that's a different kettle of fish, I think the people, in your shoes, business operators, sales agents, whatever you're doing in business, I think the people who are going to thrive in this environment are the people who've cultivated certain anti-fragile character traits or an anti-fragile mindset. For example, we talked about it sort of the last time we had a conversation, but someone who believes failure is my greatest source of learning, the more they fail, the more they learn. And so they're either winning or they're learning in a way. And so that's an anti-fragile belief there. And when we last spoke 6 months ago, you mentioned that fail faster was sort of one of the biggest takeaways that I took from that conversation. And so I was kind of curious to know, what are some of the biggest learnings you've extracted from the failures in your career, real estate or otherwise, and how can people respect failure for the teacher it really is, as opposed to licking their wounds and feeling sorry for themselves in the moment?
Yeah, great question. I think everyone has this idea of the person they want to be, but you can't get there without failure. It's just impossible. And the way I cope with failure now is, I think it's Goggins talks about the cookie jar, and you got to reach into that cookie jar in times of need. But for me, anytime something happens to me now, it's not as big of a deal as it used to be, because I just think, well, at least it wasn't as bad as that, or it wasn't as bad as that. And I mean, there are certain things that you and I went through with contracts and things, and it was like, they were, what we thought were horrific.
Yeah.
Horrific. We thought the world was ending. And then something else happens that puts that in perspective. And I think you always have to be, you have to have a good memory to put things into perspective. And a lot of these things we deal with on a day-to-day basis aren't really huge things. And it takes something like what we're going through in the environment right now with this health issue to really put things in perspective. And you have to start dealing with things with a lot more humility and empathy. And that's when you start, okay, well, that's really not a big deal. That's really not that important, because we really are all in this together. So you have to be very mindful about how other people are feeling as well.
I think that's so important. You just got to frame it correctly. Is this actually a problem in the scheme of things?
Yeah, exactly. But you have to keep in mind, when one of your clients has a problem, you have to
treat it with respect.
You have to be mindful that their problem to them is the biggest problem in the world, and it's our job to fix it.
Yeah.
But you asked the question, how do I handle it? And I think in my sphere, and I think I'm learning this more and more as well as a business owner, is because you take on so many other people's issues as well. It's not just yours, so it accelerates so quickly because it's not just your problems you're dealing with every day, it's other people's. And you start realizing that they're not that big of a deal, and you can work through every single problem. And if you can help other people understand that as well, it's even better.
Yeah. There's the 5-year rule that's floating around, like if this won't matter in 5 years, don't worry about it type thing. I think there's no hard and fast rule they can apply, but something interesting to think about. There's a quote I read on your Instagram recently: money lost, nothing lost, confidence lost, everything lost. And I really like that quote. And I know you well enough to know those are words you actually live by. Like we were talking on the phone the other day, you probably won't even remember this, but you said something which was a completely throwaway comment. It was in a very specific context as well, but you're like, man, like whatever, if I lose the house, whatever, I move back in with the in-laws or the parents, whatever it was. And obviously you're doing just fine. It's not what I'm trying to highlight here, but I guess embedded in that is an understanding that when you originate from humble beginnings, you've already scrapped it out in the past. And so if you have to scrap it out again now, whether that means downgrading the lifestyle or whatever that may be, you're capable of doing that. And so there's no worst case scenario which is really going to cripple you with fear, that also allows you to reach higher as well. But I wanted to ask you, what are your thoughts now on money and confidence and the interplay between them? Because particularly right now, people can lose their money. And I feel like if I take away your money, I'm not taking away your confidence.
Not at all. I mean, this environment's going to breed fear with everybody. I fail to see a business that is not in some way affected negatively by what we're all going through. But it's how you react to that fear that's going to get you through this successfully or not. So it's not that I ever think I'll take anything away from me. I would certainly never want to lose the house or lose anything for my family, but I don't operate in a mindset of trying to keep what I have. I've never thought, okay, well that's that locked away, let's see what I just think forward, or I try to think forward. Okay, where do I want to be? I'm certainly never going to be ashamed of having to take a step backwards if that's the case, because you can't get, well, not that I came from a bad place, but you certainly, I know what it's like to be in that position. So, and now I know all the learnings that it took me to get where I am now. And not that that's some great position either, but if I ever did go backwards, I could get back to where I was very quickly. But for me, it's about the end goal, where I want to be, always looking a year, 2 years, 3 years, 4 years down the track.
Yeah. One of the biggest, on the topic of money, one of the biggest things I learned from my time with you is that you really help me put into perspective, or at least help me to think bigger in terms of monetary value. Like, man, like, why are you even thinking about that as a purchasing decision or otherwise? Just do it. Don't think about it. Move on. Get back to work. And it's like, sometimes we're talking about amounts like thousands of dollars, and you're just like, so you equally respect it and disrespect it at the same time in a weird way. How do you sort of think about like money?
I try and make decisions really quickly. The only time I dwell on decisions is when it's a material good. So, I mean, I'm not wearing a watch at the moment. I've been deciding on which watch to purchase for, is it this one or is it this one? And then a situation like this happens, and I'm just like,
what a joke.
What am I? And it just really puts you back on track. I don't care about a watch. I don't want a watch. I've got other important things I need to, to purchase to make sure the business can keep turning. So I guess to answer your question, it is a respect and disrespect. I try and make any important decision quickly. I've been very big on that in the last probably year or 2 years, because I did find myself dwelling on some pretty big decisions, the business move in itself, and it doesn't put you in a good mind space when you dwell on decisions. So I try and make big decisions quickly, and if I do, there's a portion that obviously there'll be a monetary investment in that decision, big or small. I make myself okay with it, and it's done. And you're doing it looking down the track. You're not doing it, I never let go of money and think, I need that money to come back. Where is that money gone? It's just, well, I need to get down there. That money goes there, that money goes there.
I think it's also...
I don't know if that answers your question.
No, 100%. And something else I wanted to highlight, I think when you have the ability to generate lump sums in quick successions at time,
exactly.
Right? That's why I'm such a huge advocate for sales-based professions, because you look at money in your life differently, really. Because I know for a fact, when I was flipping burgers at McDonald's, you go to the supermarket, you're looking at a box of cereal, like, how many minutes is that worth of my time making a Big Mac, as opposed to, you just think of it totally differently.
But this is the thing, and so many people these days send me messages, how do I get into real estate? And every time I'm just like, go listen to Carter's podcast, the one you did with Mayowa. I'm like, that is how you do it. But that McDonald's story that just sums you up completely, because one of the best stories you've ever told me is you were so obsessed with making the quickest and best McDonald's burger ever. Every day you turned up, you wanted to make the most amount of burgers in the smallest amount of time and have the least failure rate. And I'm just like, that's just who you are. Like, it's bred in you. I had to learn that, but it's something you can learn. You just learned it very early.
Yeah. I think it's one of those...
That story gets me pumped. I'm still pumped on that story. Like,
I love that.
Making McDonald's burgers. Like, most people would be like, oh, I'm getting in here, I've got a bigger plan. It's like, no, you deal with what's in front of you and you do the best job you can with it.
You have to. I think it's one of those cliches that's actually true. I think the way you do one thing more or less is the way you do everything. Or at least, some things you have to put in perspective, but I think, yeah, that's a good idea. And another big idea that caught my attention the other day came from a mental conditioning expert called Trevor Moawad. And in a nutshell, he basically talks about the idea that to persevere through hardships, the key isn't to think positive thoughts, because especially given what's going on right now, how can you think positively when everything on the news is negative, you're surrounded by negativity, right? So he talks about the idea it's more so about neutralizing the negative thoughts and just getting yourself at least onto neutral ground mentally, right? And he calls that, reality-based thinking. As you know and as I know, high-end residential real estate can be absolutely brutal. Oftentimes it can be cutthroat. Many times you're on the receiving end of devastating news or having to give it. When you have one of those moments that makes you want to literally curl up in a ball and cry, how do you not do that? how do you block out the negativity and mentally get yourself onto neutral ground so you can get about doing your job?
I don't have a lot of those thoughts, to be honest. I don't have a lot of negative thoughts. I spent so long trying to train myself out of them. I think people will have a bit more spare time, even business owners now, to contemplate things which may take them down the rabbit hole of negativity. But I think this is a time where we should all be focused on creativity. This is where you start looking for opportunities, whether it be within your desk, your office, the outside world. There are opportunities to be had. You know, all these business, we all know the stories of Blockbuster and Uber, but it wasn't, you know, Netflix didn't destroy Blockbuster. Blockbuster just didn't adapt. Blockbuster killed itself. I think Netflix tried to buy Blockbuster in 2000 and they said no. And then they filed for bankruptcy in 2010, I think.
Right.
Fact check that. But yeah, Uber didn't kill taxis, you know. Netflix didn't kill Blockbuster. These companies suffocated themselves because they weren't willing to adapt or change. In fact, it seemed like they were just completely, they weren't even willing to look into it. That's why I think we all have to have an open mind, you know, because I've said things in the past, oh, I'll never do that, I'll never do this. I think this is the time where you sit back and go, well, maybe you have to do this, maybe you have to do that. I mean, no open homes, for example. Now we're all doing virtual open homes. I mean, it's nothing different. We're just on FaceTime, taking through individual buyers in depth in a property. I had 2 before you turned up here, which is why we're here. So it's just adapting, and I think there will be more changes to come. We certainly haven't seen the end of it, and I think our industry will be changed long term. I don't think someone's going to flip a switch and we're going to be back to business as usual in a month's time.
Yeah.
Even if we are back to business as it was, I think there'll be changes that'll remain.
Yeah. I guess coming back to something you said before, it's about reacting, right? So you're talking about some of the proactive things you can do in terms of adapting. But people right now are going to be getting really bad news, and even just, you know, the regulations that we'll put in place. That's devastating to some people. They're really they're grappling with that. For example, I'm thinking of a story right now. We can blur out the name of the address, right?
Yeah.
When you got that news, I was
that's what I was talking about earlier.
That was crippling. So what happened in your brain that hour, the next day, that week? How did you process that, get through it? Because you were back to yourself like that, and eventually got the result.
Well, I was just talking about that with the clients the other day. They were saying, you know, you're always so calm and cool-headed, and I said, well, the one time I've lost it was with that, and it was for about 30 seconds. And I was at home in the comfort of my own home, and I literally just let out a scream, and my wife was like, what? But that was it, and I was just like, because what can you do? If you're not the guy to fix it, that just means someone else has to fix it for you. And if someone else is fixing your problems for you, you're not doing the best job you can. So I just always take the approach of, well, I have to fix this. I have to fix this.
That's so liberating, because even when you're not at fault, when you say I'm in control and it is my fault, then no matter what happens in life, you can always, at least in your perception, do something about it. And there's nothing more healthy for your mentality.
I mean, you'd make mistakes. Everyone does when you learn, especially. And you'd be like, oh, the world's ending. And I'd be like, no, it's a big mistake. But I mean, I'm in this with you. I represent you. You represent me. What do we have to do to get this on track? And it always starts with a conversation and blatant honesty. You can never go wrong by picking up the phone as soon as possible and just getting it out there. At least everyone knows where they stand. And then you can understand what they want and how to, you know, solve the problem. You know, dispute resolution is a lot of what we do, a lot of it, and that's a very difficult thing to do. Yeah. It's a very difficult thing to do and have 2 happy parties at the end of it.
Continuing with the theme of controlling the controllables, you mentioned on Instagram recently that 7 Habits of Highly Effective People is one of your favorite books.
Yep.
And one of your favorite concepts from that book is the circle of influence and the circle of concern. I have no idea about any of this.
Yep.
So for the people like myself who haven't read the book and don't know about those 2 concepts, what do those 2 things mean, and how is it sort of relevant to this whole discussion, everything that's going on?
So glad you brought that up, because I wouldn't have. But it comes back to the first thing we spoke about here. So a lot of people, especially in these times, will concentrate on things that they can't have any influence over anyway. They sit at home and they worry about, I can't say no influence over, but they worry about their own health or what may happen, or am I going to make a sale next week, or am I going to make a sale next month? Am I going to make a sale ever again? Why are you worrying about those things when you should be worrying about the things you can control? That's all you should be worried about, are the things you can control. And rather than be worried about them, why don't you just do something about it? If you're worried about a sale next month, why don't you just increase the activity on what you know creates a sale? Why don't you talk to twice as many buyers right now? Why don't you talk to twice as many sellers to ascertain who's really committed to a sale in this environment, whether they need to sell or want to sell? So it's about, a lot of it's to do with who you hang out with. I love the concept so much because there's just so many things to talk about, but a lot of it's who you surround yourself with. I just don't surround myself with people that talk in those ways. I don't know what a lot of the negative things out there are because I don't surround myself with those people. I surround myself with people who know that this is an environment that will create opportunities, that there'll be some businesses that absolutely flourish out the other side of this, and that are looking for opportunities themselves. That's who I choose to surround myself with. And what I choose to think about and do are things that I can change today, or this evening, or when you leave here, who am I going to call? What calls do I have to make? Where could a potential sale be? Who can I approach to sell their place? So it's all about what you're filling your mind with, things you have no control over whatsoever, or the things you can directly control right now.
There's everyone knows the colloquialism, you are the average of the 5 people you hang around the most.
Yeah.
There's a spin-off on it, you are the average of the 5 ideas you're surrounded by the most. And part of that is coming back to watching the news. Like, it is important to stay informed right now, but I heard some crazy stat, like if you watch 3 minutes of news, you're 27% more likely to say you had a shitty day. Like, that's just insane. 3 minutes, it's all it takes to put you off tilt. So it's so important of what you're putting in, because your brain is a ruminating machine. It thinks about things even when you don't know what you're thinking about.
And it's difficult because there are some things, people in my position or any position may need to know. Legislation, what's changing? In some states right now, you can no longer show a property at all if it's occupied. So you need to pick up on what's happening in real time, but then how do you filter out what's going to negatively affect you and what's not? It's very difficult.
It's so tough.
That's why at the moment I'm dividing up my days just religiously. So that portion of the day is spent here. This is when I get my information about what's changed in the market. Place is doing a great job of that communication from HQ down, so I don't really have to rely on going and finding that information myself. But it's just working in small blocks throughout the day, because otherwise, I haven't watched Netflix at all. Well, that's a lie. I watched that Tiger dude.
Everyone's watching that right now.
It's horrible. It's not even a good doc. I don't even know why it's blowing up. The best thing about it is the dude's outfits. It's outrageous.
I love it.
It's given me a couple of ideas, but I'm just not, I'm working more now because you're having to do more legwork. You're having to make far more phone calls. I think my business partner, Pat, was saying to the team the other day, I think he knocked up 36 hours on his phone in 7 days. Because it's, no open homes. You're not talking to people en masse anymore. You're having to individually go and target these people.
That's what it takes.
It's
a really good idea though to get your information from curated resources. So they're giving you the facts without the fear. So I kind of really like that. So look to the government website. Just don't watch the news for it if you can avoid it. As we work towards wrapping up, I want to talk determination and resilience, because they've always been so important to success in business, and particularly for real estate, but they're really worth their weight in gold right now. And there's a quote which I think really surmises that really well, and it talks about any startup that gets started during the next few months is disproportionately likely to succeed, because success depends most of all on determination. And imagine how determined you have to be to start a startup in the middle of a global pandemic. And obviously that applies far beyond startups. But I'd be curious to know, how much of a role has sheer determination played in the success in your career? And what was a moment in your career, or even a particular deal that came together just because you willed it to happen?
Everything.
And I'm thinking 4602 right now.
Everything is just, everything in this industry and everything to do with me, I think success comes from resilience. If you can take everything that's thrown at you, look, I know I'll come out of this period of time, and my whole office will, and will be very successful on the other side of this, is because there's no plan B for me. I told someone the other day I'm too stupid to go and do anything else. But the truth of the matter is I just love this. I love what I do. I wouldn't change this for anything. So I'm just going to continue helping my clients. the deals will come. There may be a slower period, volume may drop off. People are still going to buy and sell. And as long as you're mindful about their individual situations and what they may be going through, I think a lot of great agents will be made throughout this time. And I think we may see a few of them disappear, like you did in the GFC and even the apartment market when I first entered in 2015, 14, 15 was very difficult. Very similar thing happened. But look, I think the big one I always keep going back to it was the big sale on Crosby Road that I made, because it was, before that, all of my sales were really small, and that I literally willed that to happen. I don't know if there's any other way to put it. I willed that deal to happen so bad, and everything came from that. And I knew that was such a gift, that listing, that I just worked it so hard, and everything in my life came from, I just made sure I just squeezed every bit of juice possible from that listing.
Even during good times, I want to highlight how much it takes to put a deal together, like in the high end. I think 4602 every time. I don't know if we talked about it last time, but that is such an incredible story, and I think that is essentially the epitome of everything we're talking about.
Yeah, I mean,
walk us through it.
I wrote Peter letters for years. It was one of the very first letters I wrote in real estate, was to the owner of that apartment, sitting at my desk at the boutique real estate agency that I worked for. Because it was on the market that long with the previous agent, and I just kept at it. And then, I started calling him at his office and then he eventually said to me, "You can turn up." And I was just like, all my dreams come true. And then, as we know, that was a long road itself with that property. But looking in hindsight, as it often is, that was a great sale with everything. When you account for everything that happened throughout that period and the property itself, that was a great sale.
But it was hard work just to get it. What did it take to sell it?
That was harder work again. A lot of people think that the high-end real estate market is, but it's such a great property, it sells itself. And a lot of them do, but the buyer market at that end is so thin. And then, especially in the apartment market again, it's thinner again. But that's changing. So there's a lot more buyers coming in for apartments. But back then it was quite difficult. And it was just sheer hard work. I mean, we really took every angle we could.
You harassed the buyer.
Yeah,
right.
Pretty much, yeah.
Like that was tens and tens and tens and tens of phone calls.
Yeah. Well, he said no 10, 15 times. 10 or 15 times he said no.
And you just kept calling and asking the question.
Kept calling and asking the question.
And see, this is the thing. No one wants to hear that. That's like, everyone's like, what's the silver bullet, Drew? Like, how did you get him to do it? What was the tonality thing, or what was the sales trick?
Yeah.
There is, like, it is just volume. It is number of conversations.
But you also have to understand, everyone changes daily. Just because someone says no today doesn't mean they're going to say no next year, let alone tomorrow. Something could happen you don't know about. Everyone leads very individual lives. So it wasn't just him that I was asking. It's not like I just had my, focus directly on him. There was about 4 or 5 buyers that I was working with that I was just, every week, every month, has anything changed? Would you now consider this? And of course, is there a price you would pay? A lot of them would, of course they would, but it was just too far out of the ballpark.
But I think it's the medicine everyone needs to take, but no one wants to hear is the correct
No one wants
answer.
to do the hard work.
Yeah. Continuing on that train of thought then, doing simple better is a concept I'm really resonating with at the moment, because so much of what is going to make someone successful right now is just the fundamentals. More calls, more talk time, like you said, Pat, 37 hours in a week, it's insane. And so everyone wants to know right now, Drew, what can I do to get on the front foot? Drew, what can I do to emerge out the other side of this?
I get it all the time.
Like, how do I capitalize, right? Health crisis aside, can't stress that enough, that's awful. But in terms of the economic side of things, how can I capitalize? That's what everyone wants to know. What would your advice be to someone in your position, or a sales agent or an early stage entrepreneur? If they called you on the phone asking you for your advice, what are you saying to them?
It's the same advice you give them every single time they ask that question. It's everything they know how to do and aren't doing. There is no special sauce. It's the same stuff you and I spoken about. We're in a different market, and like I said, the agents who are going to do really well at the moment will be operating with humility. I think that's very important. I think a lot of agents have to change perception a little bit, so operating with humility, and having conversations with empathy. A true understanding. And this is where I think it's really important that you are dealing with an agent that does have some understanding. I'm not saying that a young agent can't go out there and completely blitz it, because they can, but I just think now is the time where people are wanting to deal with someone who maybe has gone through it.
Before we get to the last question, where can people find you online if they want to check out what you're up to?
Definitely Drew Davies.
Definitely Drew Davies, baby.
Same place as always.
Last question. If everything we talked about today wasn't to leave this room, wasn't to be shared with a wider audience, in light of some of the things we talked about and everything you're thinking about at the moment, if you had to distill down your key advice or even a particular quote you think is relevant right now into a tweet-sized caption, what would it say?
Oh, that's so hard, a tweet. You know I love talking.
There's a quote you mentioned before.
What did I mention before?
Times have changed.
Oh, yeah, the biggest decisions are made in times of change. That's true, but I think what's important for everyone to understand in this particular market, and I think this is so important, is there are a lot of people struggling, that are having these negative thoughts, and it's very easy for someone like me to sit here and say, oh, just be positive, and that's not what I'm trying to say. I don't just click my fingers and be positive. I think we have to be very mindful of how we portray ourselves and what conversations you're having with people. I'm trying to check in with even with my friends more often, just to see what's up, just to let them know that I'm here, because not everything is always sunshine and lollipops. And it's very important you are reaching out to people who, because as real estate agents, we get carried away. There'd be times where I hadn't spoken to a certain friend in a month. Now I'm taking the opportunity to make sure I'm checking in with my friends more often. So I think the biggest piece of advice I can give right now, biggest decisions in times of change. This is a time of change. Make that decision. Make that decision now to know that you're going to get out the other side of it. And do it with hard work. There is still hard work to be done. I'm still in a suit on a Saturday.
Yeah.
Just because I'm having a virtual inspection doesn't allow me to get around in flip-flops and DTs as much as I'd love to.
I love it, man. Thanks for coming back on.
My pleasure. I'd give you a bro 5, but we're not allowed.
We're not allowed. Done.
All right.